Hey, we just shot a class on riveted bangles.
So we made these out of 14 gauge wire. We did a little texturing, paddled the ends, rivet them together, lots of information on here. Just a reminder, we shot this as a live show over on our Beaducation Facebook page. So you'll hear us talking to customers. In fact, a customer comes and picks up her order right in the middle.
That's right, first time.
But there's good information in here. If you're watching this on YouTube, please leave us a comment, maybe a thumbs up, maybe subscribe if you want to hear from us some more. And let's get into it.
Yeah, come check it out.
So today we are going to do some riveting. I think we introduced riveting in one of our Facebook Lives a while ago, but I was thinking about it the other day, and it's such a handy technique to have, especially for those of you that are scared of soldering. And we hear that a lot in our private Facebook group, and please do come join us over there if you haven't already. Do a little search for beaducation.com community, metal stamping and beyond. Join us. But anyway, the discussions over there, some people are like, oh, I'm scared of torch, I'm scared of the torch, which first of all, come on now, get in there. Soldering is awesome, but if you are indeed scared of the torch and you want to start somewhere else, riveting is a great option. So it's called a cold connection technique, where you're going to be putting two metals or two blanks or something together by riveting them, not involving any torch or heat. This project today that we're going to do is a riveted bangle, and I thought this would be a good one on the heels of a couple weeks ago. We showed you how to flatten wire to make the wraparound rings. So we do have on our site a full stepped out class on this. I'm going to be covering it a little bit quicker, but I just want to show you real quick how to get to that on our site, because that's where you'll find the list of tools and materials needed. And if you go here on our site, this is our class page. And you can get to this just by hovering over the Learn and then go down to the classes. You get to this page and it's right here, Riveted Bangle Bracelets. That's me, a long time ago. And down here you'll see the full list of tools and materials needed. So that's pretty awesome. And you can always refer to this. Lots of tools and materials here. You don't need all this stuff. Actually, you need very minimal stuff for this. I just wanted to show you all the things that are helpful, and I'm going to zoom in so I can show you some of the bracelets. So these are the samples from the class, and all it is, what I'm using today is 14 gauge round wire. I'm going to shape it and paddle the ends and toss a rivet right there. This is a good one because it's quite hidden. You can hardly see the rivet, but you can see the back. This is just a plain one, very plain.
I feel like the more you texture, or if you have design on it, you really don't see the rivet.
Yeah, and you can actually stamp right on the rivet.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. And here's one in copper, and this is a little thicker. I think this might be 12 gauge. And I'm going to tell you how to adjust the recipe for using a thicker gauge. And if your next question is, can I use thicker? Absolutely. I wouldn't use much thinner than 14 because it just becomes a little flimsy. Maybe you can pull it off with 16, but yeah, you can definitely go bigger, like 12, 10, 8, knock yourself out. You just have to adjust the measurement, and we're going to go over that.
Add a little onion and oregano.
Oh, yes, that's a good idea. I love that. All right, so that's that one. Now this is one I just made for today, and I want to show you that what I did here, instead of just paddling the ends, let's see if I can get a little closer, and riveting, I paddled the ends and stamped on a circle and riveted that over. So it's paddle on top of paddle and circle, all with the same size hole, rivet running through the whole thing, and I also textured it.
What stamp did you use?
That's the new mermaid scale stamp that you love oh so much.
I love it.
So this is really great, fits me perfect. It's very light. And just remember, if ever you rivet something really heavy on here on a bangle, it's just going to cause a bangle to like flip and always be upside down on your wrist. But this one's light enough that it will, flow wherever it wants. So I'm going to talk you through this, but we're going to do the basic one. Okay, I'm going to do it with copper in our demonstration today. This is 14 gauge. Again, you could use thicker, you can use fine silver, you can use silver. It all works great. I can see that my wire's a little wonky, so I naturally do this no matter if my wire's wonky or not. It's just habit. But this is pretty thick, and what I'm doing is trying to straighten it. So if you can't do it with your hands, try with some nylon.
I feel like you do that with your hair all day too. It's like you were meant to work with wire.
I know, I do. I like to work with my hands. Okay, so now I'm going to make this one to fit you. So the first thing we need to do is measure your hand. So come on in here.
Okay.
Here she is.
My hand.
Okay, for bangles, remember the hardest part of the bangles is getting it over like your knuckles. That's kind of the biggest part of your hand and wrist. So that's what you need to measure to make sure that it's going to fit you. So come on over here a little bit more, and I'm going to take this tape measure. I'm going to come underneath, and the biggest part of your hand is typically right there across your your back knuckles, right? Like back here.
Yes, yes.
Don't you think?
Yeah.
Okay. So what you don't want to do is be really, really loose like that and not really, really tight either. So just have it like sitting normal. And I can see that that's 210, 20, 30, 230 millimeters. So I would imagine, try this on. This should be too small for you. Yeah,
Yeah, a little bit.
You can make it happen. Okay,
a little bit.
Perfect. So 230 millimeters. Let's remember that number. Now, onto that number, you need to add the thickness of your wire times 3. And that's just a general recipe that works really, really great for all wire, because remember, the thicker the wire gets, it's actually going to shrink the inner circumference, which is what you're worried about. So you have to add a little bit more to make up for that. It's just like when you make a bracelet with really big beads. If you wear a 7-inch bracelet, you can't string big beads on 7 inches because the inner diameter of that circle or the circumference will be really, really small and it won't fit. So that is the little recipe for you. So measure exactly, add 3 times your wire. Now 14 gauge, which is what I'm working with here. You can measure it with your millimeter gauge. It's about 1.5. I know that 14 gauge is actually 1.63, I think, yeah. So I would take 1.63, since I'm working in millimeters, and multiply it by 3. And that comes to just under 5, I remember, because I just did the math. So I'm gonna average it up to 5. So for you, we need to cut our wire at it was 230 millimeters, right? Mm-hmm. And now we're gonna add that 5. So 235, right? 10, 20, 30, yes. Okay, cool. So that is what I'm going to cut my wire at. Now, if you're going to do something like this, where I textured the wire, or this, where I stamped the wire, do all that work first, because it's going to grow the wire. So like when I made this one, I first hammered flat a bunch of wire. I just came in with my chasing hammer and kind of did this and fed it through until it was as flat as I wanted. And then I stamped it. And I just kind of overdid it. Let's say I needed 235 millimeters. I went a little further just to make sure I had everything set how I wanted it. And then I measured it and cut it. Because if I measured it and cut it first and then flattened it and then stamped it, it would grow it. So then your bracelet would be too big. Mm-hmm. Make sense? Anybody got any questions on that so far?
Not so far.
Okay, so let's just cut this little piece off that I just hammered. And let's measure this. 235 is right there, and here's 0. So I hope that that is right. Should be about right. Okay, so this is really, really still wonky. So if that's the case, you can come in with your plastic mallet and kind of hammer it. See how that side is now pretty straight. This also is hardening it, which is great because it's going to help it keep its shape. So as I'm doing this, I'm turning the metal. So that's the way to straighten stuff that's too hard to straighten with your hand, right? Okay, let me zoom a little bit for this. So what I'm going to do here is paddle the ends of this wire. And I'm going to paddle them out flat so that I have space to punch a hole and connect it to the other side, okay? So let's see, I want to make sure it paddles best if you start with a nice flush cut. And I'm going to use my chasing hammer, and I'm going to concentrate the middle of the hammer right there on the end. See that? Maybe a little more. And then I'm going to So, I feel like this wire is too long. I hope we measured it right.
Want to do one more measure just to
Someone's
make sure?
coming in the door.
Oh.
Someone's here to pick up their order. How great is that? Okay, so now that it's flattened, we are going to, hi. Someone's here. You want to come on live? No, probably not. She doesn't. Okay, we have a customer here picking up our order. Hi, say hi.
Hi. Love this place.
So great. Thank you. Have a good day.
Lisa, can I ask you a quick question?
Oh, we
I have
got a question. Bring it up.
Are you hammering using the middle of the hammer or the side of the hammer?
I am trying to use the middle, but so it's concave a little bit. So you want the striking area to hit right there. You can tilt it a little bit if that's the case, but if you have a hammer that's not very, not concave, convex, not very convex, the edge will make a mark. The Fretz hammer is great. It's just slightly convex and the edges are rounded, so you can tilt it a little bit. And you will just grab some copper wire and practice that. You'll very quickly get a feel for how that works. So what I'm doing here is because it came out a little bit weird, I'm just going to use my file to clean up this paddled end and round it out. That's so funny. That's the first time we've ever had a customer come.
I know, yeah.
In your life. It's so great. Okay. And now, just because my gut is telling me that this feels very long, I want to measure one more time.
Let's do it.
I feel like we measured wrong. But let's measure twice, cut once. Is that what everybody says? No, that's right.
Okay.
Yeah. And then we'll remeasure this. Yeah.
Oh,
We should be
perfect.
good. We should be good. All right. So my ends are paddled. You see that?
Looking
And
good, just like
there.
an oar.
Yes. Like a paddle.
Yes.
Must be where they got that name.
Must be.
Okay, so now I'm going to come in with my hole punch plier. I'm using a 1.5 millimeter hole punch plier because my rivets, which I'm using these nail head rivets, are 1.5 millimeter. So if you were using a thicker rivet, you need a slightly bigger hole. With riveting, the key is getting the rivet to fit into the hole just about perfect. Obviously, you can't put a rivet in a hole that's too small. If you do punch a hole that's too small, go ahead and file it out with a round file. That's actually kind of ideal because then you'll make the fit really, really tight. But if you have a hole that's big and your rivet wobbles around in there, it won't rivet down well. So that's number one key. Okay, I'm going to come in here. Here's the tricky part. I'm going to take it out of the shot for a second because I need to look at it closely. I'm making sure that I'm in the right spot. There we go.
Now, why is there a little piece of paper there on your hole punch plier?
So these hole punch pliers, they sometimes mar the little stump that has the pin coming out of it. If you squeeze down really, really hard, it will mar up your metal. It'll leave like a little,
Divot.
well, like a little scratch around the hole, a little circle scratch around the hole. So by putting, all this is I don't remember what I used, maybe cardstock, maybe some thick tape. By putting it on there, it's acting as a cushion.
Perfect.
Good question, Mel. Now look at this. This was my worry today, that while it was live, I would punch my hole wrong, like on the side or something, and that's pretty darn close. That's kind of scary. So let's hope I don't do this one on the edge.
Yes. But
this is a reason why you want to make sure that you paddle out your ends pretty wide. In fact, this one looks kind of narrow, so I'm going to go a little thicker. So that's giving you more space here to land that hole. I'm going to pull it out again real quick, excuse me, while I look closely because I am blind.
So are you using the hole punch plier because you've flattened out that thick wire so it's okay
Yes.
to punch something that thick?
Correct. So I wouldn't be able to do this through round wire. Obviously, that's not going to work. And if you are flattening out wire that's this thin, hole punch plier is great. But if you flatten out wire and you can't get it this thin, you might struggle with a hole punch plier. You may need to drill it or maybe use a screw down punch to pop that hole in there.
Melissa says she does the paper on her punch too, but it still leaves a little mark at the bottom. I think also if you kind of gently punch, like sometimes I punch a little bit harder, It depends on your grip,
And
right?
every now and then I've seen it very rarely, that right here is kind of, maybe that's what she's talking about. This is not awesome, and it scratches.
Oh.
You can come in with a file. I think this one's gonna be too big. No, it's all right. And this is my good file, so I wouldn't do this, but like a junky file, you can come in and try to pull off any burr that's on there. It's pretty rare. If that happened all the time, I wouldn't sell this tool. So,
Oh, that's a good idea,
but that's
though.
a good way to save it. Okay, so now I've got this big, long wire, and it's time to shape it. So you can definitely use a bracelet mandrel if you have that, but they're very heavy and very expensive, where the bracelet bending plier is much cheaper and really, really easy to use and transportable. So this guy, the jaws are like a little smiley face. Hi. Hi, Mel. Sorry. Oh no, I made her cough. And what that does is when you squeeze wire in there, it gives it that gentle curve. We also have them in ring bending pliers that will give it a tighter curve for a ring. So all I'm going to do is put it
But
in
a smaller
here.
smile.
Smaller smile, yes. I'm going to put it in here and squeeze, squeeze, squeeze. I can't hold it like this because it's very uncomfortable, but I'm just showing you what happens right there. You see that? So I'm going to squeeze, squeeze, squeeze as I feed it through. And I'm definitely not being gentle. Because what's happening here is if I just chew away, I'm hitting it on both sides with basically, it's kind of, and I say this in the class, it's kind of like hitting it with two plastic mallets. And all it's going to do is really harden it in its shape. So that's great. So
Oh.
squeeze as hard as you want and as many times as you want. And you can see it's starting to curve. It's kind of hard for me to turn it up for the camera, but I will do it right there. Any questions come up while I'm doing this?
No, no. Huh.
Got the sound on here. There we go. Okay, so this is making a nice tight circle, and these are the curve in here making it so that this is going to overlap, and that's fine because I'm going to open it back up. And we're just going to continue on. Perfect. I mean,
That's
not
just a
perfect.
smart little
It's kind of
tool.
wonky, but
Oh, yeah.
we can fix that. Okay, so we're going to open it up. Let me try this on your wrist real quick before we solder, or slide it in. Yeah, that's going to be great. I said solder. We're not soldering. Okay, so here is my shape so far. And because this was a little bit longer than the circle that this makes, I'm just going to pull it open a little bit. And these guys are facing, you can see they face a weird way, and that totally happens when you curl it up. So just grab the entire flattened part, and bend it up.
Turn it.
Yeah. Okay. You want these to overlap perfectly like that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So your next question is, well, how the heck are you gonna rivet that?
Yes.
With this southern accent, apparently.
I guess so.
Okay, I'm gonna use a copper nail head rivet, and I'm going to feed it in from behind. Now you have a decision to make here actually, which is, do you like this better on top or do you like that better on top? I definitely like this one better.
Me too.
Actually, I don't, they're both a little wonky, but that's okay. So let's just go with this one. So I'm going to overlap them and get that rivet through. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Now there's a couple ways that you can rivet this. One is to take your bench block and just slightly, I'm going to move some things out of the way and I'll shift the camera for you. Just slightly hang it over the edge like this and lay it down right there.
Oh, yes.
Cut it and rivet it. That actually works because you're not tapping really hard, and even if you did, it's not going to, I'm pushing down, it's not like it's taking the whole bench block off. That works really well if that's what you got. The other option, which is what I've got over here, and this was, Aisha showed me this trick. This is a table vise that we sell. And you just need to get something in here that forms a little, like a mini little bench block. So this is a punch from a disc cutter. That totally works. A punch from a dapping block works. So the idea here is you're going to slide it over and hold it right there and rivet it down. Pretty cool. Also, I'm just giving you options so you can see what you may have at home. This is a riveting hammer. I'm actually going to rivet with my chasing hammer. This one works great. You just clamp right down on that, thread the bracelet right over the handle and right onto there. I think we'll stick
Oh.
with this one. How about that? So make sure it's really tight so that when I tap away, it doesn't just fall right through. And this table vise, it's one that we sell, but you likely have a table vise in your garage or something. I mean, it's kind of a well-known tool.
But I do like that they could hang the bench block off if they
Yeah,
didn't.
totally. It works better with the big ones, but I think the 2.5 by 2.5 will work well too. So now I've got my rivet through both holes, and I'm going to trim it. And I want to leave about a half millimeter to a millimeter of material, and that's what I'll need to spread the rivet and flatten the rivet so that everything is set. So you can't really see from this angle, but I'm going to come in with my cutters. I'm looking from the side. That looks about right. Let me double check before I cut it because I just shifted down.
This might be a good point to ask this too, because Rebecca had asked with the Fat Daddy, because she has a different cutter. Does it pinch the top or does it leave it pretty flat when it cuts thick wire?
The fat, it fell out. I'm trying to get it back
Oh.
in. The Fat Daddy is pretty flush, but it leaves a little bit of a pinch, and I'll show you exactly what I do for that, because you want to have your rivet, there we go, nice and flat. I was hoping to pick this up so I could show it to you from the side, but it's going to slip right out. But I promise you that there is about, looks like about a millimeter or so of material. So I'm going to come in with my file and gently file the top of that rivet. I like to start with a really flat rivet. So if I had used like my Tronics razor flush cutter, I probably wouldn't have to do this file step. But what happens is if you don't do this, you actually have a little bit more material in the middle where there's that pinch, and you end up kind of with an oval shaped rivet.
Oh,
Okay, that looks good.
that's great.
I want to pick it up and show, but I don't want it to fall, but I'm going to risk it. Here we go.
Oh, and Marianne had said, can you use other types of rivets? Which you can, you just have to worry about what the hole.
Definitely. And I mean, we have decorative rivets. I'm like, oh, I'll use a decorative rivet. But then I realized that the decorative part goes on the inside.
Oh.
So that wasn't the most awesome idea. Now, remember this bracelet at this point is where I also put on this top circle. And this one I actually use the riveting system. That's why you see more of like a eyelet in there. The riveting system is really easy because you don't need all this situation. You just slide it over the system and it screws down the rivet. So Angela's going to put a link up there to the 2 riveting tools that we have, and there's a product video on there for you guys to watch, see how that works. Okay. So I like to use my chasing hammer to rivet. I'm just going to take the bald end and tap, 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 tap around. This isn't the greatest angle because you guys can't see what I'm doing. You can also use, I was going to show you the riveting hammer, but it's in here.
Oh, that's right.
You can use a riveting hammer, and it's got just a long end. And for that, you would just tap in one direction, then move your hand and tap in the other direction. Move your hand and tap in the other direction. So I'm going to tap this down, and then I'll pull the hammer away so you can see. And it's starting to mushroom out. I wonder if I can get closer without losing focus. Let's see here.
And Beth had mentioned so that she can get the right cut on the rivet, the right length. She uses an old room key with a hole punched in it. So that is exactly the right thickness, so she knows how to cut the rivet.
Yeah, and that's perfect. Aisha shows that trick in a couple of her classes, and she takes an 18 gauge metal and punches a hole. And then what you do, and I think this is what Beth is talking about, 18 gauge is 1 millimeter thick, so it's kind of perfect, is you slide it over and then cut it flush against that metal, because then when you take that 18 gauge piece off, there will be a millimeter left. So same for 24 gauge if you wanted a 0.5 millimeter, and she calls it her riveting tiles, and it's really,
yeah.
really a good idea.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to come in now. And you can see it's starting to mushroom out a little bit. Maybe you can see, but trust me.
Oh, I can see it, yeah.
It is, yeah. And when I'm tapping with this, I'm kind of going in a circle, and in the middle to make sure I'm not just striking in one area. Now, as you rivet this down, make sure everything is where you want it. Like if I rivet it down and my bracelet was like this, it's going to be set.
Yes.
So in fact, I will show you, because I like to show you mistakes. On this one, well, you can't really see it. Let me pull it on here. On this one, my lotus is a little crooked. I don't think you can tell, but it is because I didn't center it before I did that final whack. So just keep that in mind because things can shift as you go. Like right now, that's not perfect. I'm going to bring it more like that. Okay. And I'm making sure to keep the hammer on the rivet. Once you have it mushroom down enough, you can flip the hammer and hit it down with the head, but I'm going to go a little bit more. And this rivet is nice and soft, so it's flattening and mushrooming out perfectly. And now I'm going to come in and sort of set it. You can leave it sticking up a little bit or try to get it really flat. And the flatter you get it, it kind of blends better. Okay, let's take a look at this. Got a lot of shine there. Let's come zoom out a little, come back up to the bench block area here. A purple sandbag. And then let's see if I can get it, give it a second to refocus on my fingers. Okay, so now we're left with this, and it's a little bit wonky shape. So that's when a bracelet mandrel, if you have one, comes in very handy because you just slide it over and just tap away on there. Or what I do is shape it with my hands because it's still a little bit malleable to where I like it. And that looks awesome. And then to set it in the shape, I'm going to go ahead and tap it on my bench block because it's, you know, a flat thing here with my plastic mallet. This is not changing the metal, it's not flattening the metal, it's just hardening it. So this is the same thing you would do for ear wires, like on the loop that goes for your ears. You sort of hammer it on here to make sure that it keeps its shape. Now if I was doing this with my chasing hammer, it would actually flatten it, which would look pretty cool. But remember, as it gets wider this way, it's going to shrink the circumference in here. So if you're going to do that afterwards, don't adjust your sizing. I don't want to tap too hard on there. Okay, let's try it on. Ooh, yeah, nice. Ooh, that's good, nice and hard. Try it on, Mel.
Okay. Ooh.
Does it feel like it's too big or about right?
No, it feels just right.
Okay, so it came, yeah, this is, let me hold your hand here. So this is perfect where you want it to like be a little bit hard to get over the largest part of your hand, which is your knuckles, because that way it'll be too hard to just slide off as you know, wave to your fans.
Yes, we use my fans.
This was a 1.5 millimeter hole punch because the stem on my rivets were 1.5. So if you were going to do a 14 gauge rivet, which you definitely can, you just have to form a rivet on both sides, which we show in our riveting class, then you're going to have to up that hole to 1.63. Now that's a little weird size, so I would use a 1.6 side of the screw down hole punch and then go in with a round file, just ream it out slightly so that 14 gauge fits perfect. But those are the things you need to consider when coming up with your recipes. Anything else?
And that was 14 gauge that you used today in the
14 gauge was for the bracelet, but the rivet was not 14 gauge. The rivet was 1.5, which I think is somewhere around 16.
Which I think are what most of our rivets that are already made are.
I think that's right. I think they're 1.5. Yeah, which is why we carry the 1.5 plier, because we used to only carry 1.8 and 1.25.
And then we added that one in. I can't wait to try so many of the little tiny stamps and the mermaid. I kind of want to make like 10 different bangles, all with different textures.
Yeah, they're fun. They're fun, especially, I mean, you're not going to get the literal translation of your design stamp on here unless it's teeny tiny, because you don't have a lot of space, but you could see the one that I showed you with the lotus on it, that you can get a little bit of texture, and it looks pretty cool. I also like to texture with the back of my riveting hammer or texture hammers. It's kind of what, well, actually what I didn't show you on that other one, I'm gonna pull it down real quick because I want to show you something. So this one was done with the riveting hammer. I'm gonna come down as far as the texture. Get that guy out of there. So that's where I got those lines along the edges. See that? And then the black, I probably used liver sulfur sat in there. But then what I did is after I paddled and riveted, I came back in with the hammer again to blend it. Because when you paddle, you're gonna hammer out any of that texture. And it's gonna be like this awesome texture and then plain flat wire and then this random rivet. So I put it back on and came back through with my riveting hammer to texture the rivet to kind of hide it. Which you can stamp right on it as well. All right, everybody. Well, that's it for this time. Continue to leave questions. Bye-bye.
Bye.